Just a bit of an introduction. Welcome to those guys attending the RPA webinar on Career Insight, and particularly looking at entrepreneurship and starting your own business. We've got two great guys on here that we're going to chat to around what they've done with their businesses, how they started, and sort of the journey they've been on with it. Just a bit of housekeeping from our side. My name's Josh. I work at the RPA. I'm a transition manager, sort of looking after the players that leave the game and making sure that they sort of get on with their second careers in a smooth way and a positive way. Just to let you know, this is being recorded, so you have to pop out any time, and please feel free to do so. We can post you the recording after the sessions happen, the webinars happened. If you do have any questions, then please ask the Q&A box down at the bottom. Send them through. They come through to me, and then I'll ask the guys as we go, or potentially at the end, if any questions come through. We're looking at about sort of 30 to 45 minutes, depending on what what questions come in and how the chat goes. And I guess sort of in all of it all, I don't know if anyone saw the article in the Times at the weekend about Jake Paladri and how he started a cider business recently, and how we sort of feel that there's around 12% of current players sort of with ventures alongside of rugby. So it's quite a nice sort of timely webinar, I guess, around sort of starting a business, and that sort of article coming out about Jake and what he's up to, and just goes to show that he's doing extremely well and he's got the sort of the business running on side, so it can be done. So just a bit of a brief introduction before I hand over to the guys to tell us a bit more about what they do. So Max Henderson, Hotpod Yoga, business club partner of the RPAs, has a sort of an interest in rugby, which we'll come on to in a bit as well. And then Andy Hazell, former player, Gloucester player, Smart Home Sounds, which he set up 5-6 years ago now, which again he'll come on to. But great to have you guys on board. I appreciate you giving up the time to come and chat through the business. And I'll come straight into you, Max, I guess. Tell us a bit about Hotpod Yoga, when you started it and why and what it is.
So in that order, well, we started it in any order. We started it eight years ago. I started it with a good mate of mine, who I've known kind of for all my life. And I was previously a management consultant at the time and living in London. And I was interested in being an entrepreneur, and I had no interest in yoga, interestingly. I had the same perspective on it than a lot of people had, which is it was, slightly terrifying, a little bit creepy, quite culty, and not something that was remotely interesting to me. And then Nick, who's my co-founder, got into it, and I kind of mocked him for it and thought he was a bit of a fool, because it felt like he was joining a cult. And then actually I got into it a bit more, and we kind of sat down and looked at the yoga market and began to saw a big opportunity, basically, in that it was essentially a very, very fragmented market. There was no one really doing anything of any interest, and we saw an opening and an opportunity to essentially bring a yoga concept to a mainstream, basically, and kind of bring yoga to the modern day and build a big brand around it. And so we've now got 80 odd sites, 85 sites or something around, mainly around the UK, but also internationally as well. We've got 15 or so outside the UK. And well, I mean, they're mostly closed now, but generally we've been, prior to that, we've been growing strongly, and we're kind of looking forward to reopening again.
And just that, you also, apart from the connection, the RPA connection within rugby?
Within rugby, so rugby is an interesting one. It's because what we do, like our classes are they're very different from a regular yoga class. They're very intense, both physically and mentally. They're very, very calming, and so they're very effective. They're very kind of performance focused, and so we've worked a lot with rugby players, and rugby clubs. So we worked with Quins for years, so sort of 4 or 5 years, where we had a studio there. Basically, our classes all run in pods, which are like 20 to 25 person yoga studios, but they're these very immersive environments. And they're also kind of pop up. They can, then you sort of assemble them on site. And so we worked with Quins for years, and we've also worked with the England squad for the last 4 or 5 years. and they've always had a pod in any of their camps, and then we've also created these mini pods for them at the moment, which are kind of COVID secure equivalent of our normal classes, but just for one person.
Exciting, very good. And Hazy, I'm going to call you Hazy. I'm not going to call you Andy, but Hazy, a bit about your company, mate, and why and when. And
yeah, so I think like many of the players, started probably 6-7 years ago. Sort of last couple of years of my career where you're at the stage like, shit, what am I going to do? You know, it starts, every season goes by and you start worrying, what am I going to do? What am I going to transition to? So for me, I was unsure. So then I remember sitting down one day and thinking, actually, what do I like? What do I enjoy doing? Because if you go from, loving what you do, having a laugh every day, to something you hate, I just thought it's just not good for me. So I figured out that I was wasting loads of money on technology, music, TVs, and all the boys were saying, is this good? Is that good? What are you buying? So I thought, why don't I set up a website that's selling things like that, like I do to the players organically? So that was it. Just started from there. Started with a couple of small brands. Couldn't really get any big brands at the time. No one was really interested. So there was a brand name called Sonos, which was really up and coming. I loved the product, so I bought into that 6-7 years ago and took it on, and we've just grown from there. Really started off at the cupboard at home while I was playing, and then I was lucky when I finished playing, I got something to jump into, albeit it wasn't a big, the salary wasn't to go where we wanted it to be, but it gave me something to drive for, really, and to push on with.
And I suppose a bit of background just for the guys that are listening. I've known Andy for a number of years, both sort of fortunate to play with him, but also be his development manager when he was at Gloucester. And we were just sort of saying on the call earlier that he was one of those players that didn't have an idea of what he wanted to do, like many guys do. And the guys that are listening, this is obviously might resonate with you, but he was sort of definitely one that was sort of trying to find out what it was he enjoyed. And I think the important thing, like you just alluded to there, mate, is that you actually found, you're always sort of known as the tech guy, everyone that wanted to have a new computer, TV, gaming, whatever. It was always go to Hazy. He knows what to look for and what to talk about. But it was, I suppose, a real interest of yours, and dare I say it, is now ended up being your job, your passion, your business. So it stemmed from something maybe you didn't think it was ever going to be, to something that has been the thing you've set up and successful at now.
I think it's, in hindsight, you're petrified when you're in that stage, but everyone's got something they love. And if you can monetize that, where we are today with the internet, YouTube, you can monetize quite a lot, which I think is really exciting for the people now coming towards the end of their career.
And how important was it for you as well, just to have, I suppose, a relatively low risk, exploring other things? Yes, there's a financial risk to it towards setting up your own business, etc. But knowing whilst you were still playing, there's still the bills are paid, the mortgage was paid, etc. was still there, and you could still do that because rugby was bringing in that income. And I guess building something in the background, as you said, to go into when you finish was put your mind at rest or ease a bit more, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that was a big thing for me. And looking back now, you think actually, like a lot of the, I speak to some of the boys and they set up businesses, and in reality, your wages are paid. So, I wish I could invest. I wish I'd invested more in the business when I didn't have when I had the disposable income, but I was being tight, didn't really, but I soon found out that, the time I invested and the money I invested in it, when I started to scale that up, it actually paid back more dividends. So it's an interesting part of that.
Yeah. And Max, you sort of talk about, did you have aspirations as a sort of a teenager? Did you do stuff at school around selling T-shirts to your mates for a couple of quid extra and making, did you have that sort of entrepreneurial sort of strike in you sort of thing when you were younger?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I think like I didn't do the cliche things of, I don't know, selling lemonade or whatever it might be, or selling T-shirts, as you say. But actually, I probably, again, illegally made fake IDs for people when I was at school. So that was the stem of my entrepreneurship. Probably. But then to be honest, it was also the fact that I was working as a corporate job in a management consultancy, and I just always felt like it never had that genuine drive and excitement. Like it never really captured me, and it always felt like something was missing. And so it definitely felt very natural to me moving into entrepreneurship, and it felt like it was naturally kind of what I was yearning for in a way, for sure.
And what made you hit that button? Because I know obviously a few guys, everyone sort of maybe has ideas of businesses and things they want to do, and I suppose some of them hold back because of security, etc. What made you sort of press that "I'm doing this" button?
It was I was fortunate in the sense that I also kind of kept my old job, developed it kind of on the side to a degree, and just kind of was able to launch it in a very kind of beta fashion, like just try things out. And essentially we just saw a lot of demand very quickly, and so it was literally like 3 days into launching it, I took the decision to leave my job, because it was like, well, this has worked. And we essentially got some significant press really early on that then sort of drove a lot of demand very quickly, and I just kind of made that jump. That being said, I think that's quite often, like, it's a rarity to be able to do that, to be able to have both. And I think quite often that does hamper people, for sure, is that they never actually just make the commitment. I think it is generally really hard to do unless you actually commit to it fully and actually make the jump, because otherwise you never have that kind of that pressure, like that actually forces you to make a success of it. It's something I talk about quite a lot, because we've got franchisees we work with. They're all obviously entrepreneurs in themselves, and often they'll say to us, I want to start this franchise, but I kind of want to keep my other job on the side. What I'll always say to them is that it will just always be a better business if you throw everything at it, and if half of your time, and it's not even just about time, it's about actual kind of focus and kind of passion. You don't have the bandwidth necessarily to put it into multiple things. And I think you do just need to ultimately just take that jump and commit, even if it is a risk at the time. It's also a hell of a lot harder to do, when you're further down the line. I was in my early 20s when I did it. I had no mortgage, I had no kids. It was not actually that difficult leap to jump. But it's respect to people who do it further down the line, because it's a scary jump to make, for sure.
Yeah, and I guess, Andy, you were sort of forced a bit with the time and from the game, to get into it, and the go button obviously being hit maybe a couple of years prior to that. But in terms of going off on your own and sort of leaving, like many guys will appreciate on the call, is leaving that group of people around you that you see every day, that support you, that get you up if you're feeling a bit down, etc. What was it like going off on your own and setting up a business that that was all relatively new from a full-time point of view?
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me it was pretty, so the business was running in the background while I was playing. Bit of context around it's quite interesting, actually. So about 2-3 days before I retired, I was actually speaking to Nigel, the DOR at the time, about extending my contract another year. So in my mind, I was all going to get over it. I was going to spend another year. So the one day I drove into the club, doctor called me and said, look, we've got some results through. This is, we think, what are you thinking? We think you should call it a day. And I was like, okay, I'll call it a day. So literally shook the doctor's hand, shook Nigel's hand, and I was like, what do I do? Literally, what do I do now? Drove in. So I was like, they said, just come in tomorrow, go home. So I literally just drove home, and my wife was like, what are you doing home? And I was like, oh, that's it, I've retired now. And then she was like, but 2 days ago, you were going to sign a contract. So it was literally, so it took me, I'd say, that day, I got home and I was like, right. And it actually just shocked me. So the first time I had to it freaked me out a bit. So then I just thought, right. So I literally thought, what am I going to do? So I just went out, and people who know me, I don't drink a lot. I've got a bottle of champagne, and I come home and I just celebrated the career that I had. I needed something just to define that line of it ending and something new starting. So I did that. We celebrated, my mates celebrated all the fun times, all the banter. Woke up the next day, and that was it. Focused on the business, and right from that day, I didn't really look back at all. Didn't worry about hesitate. Loved my time with the rugby, and just went forward from there.
Yeah, and you sort of constantly say as well, like you sort of yes, you look back and look at the memories that you had, but actually, you know, the future is where you are going, as it were, and the business, etc. And that's where, you know, I suppose your focus is now is what's coming in front of the now and the future, and without sort of looking back too much. I guess on sort of that, in terms of the business itself, you know, we talk a lot about business plans and getting one in place and making sure, you know, a lot of people say that you should have one. I guess, Max, you know, in terms of that planning phase, was it something you would sort of say you must have one, or how did you go about sort of getting the plan together, as it were, to make sure, you know, to launch, I guess?
So I think, I mean, in essence, we did to a degree, but I find that business plans are really useful from actually just from a personal perspective of giving you the confidence to do it. Because if you, it's a big call to make, as I said, and if you're blindly doing it, completely blindly, and you're just saying, then, you know, it's very hard to sort of bring up the confidence or courage to actually make that step. If you've got a plan, you know, you've thought this through and you've got some confidence in that plan. But what I think the mistake that people make is they agonize over it, and they then, you know, they think it's going to be this bound thing they're going to stick to forever. They think it's going to become their reality, and it's just not at all. And I feel like business plans are useful for that first psychological step, but beyond that, stick it in a drawer and probably never look at it again, because basically you have to just take the jump and then learn quickly, and you have to adapt quickly. And at that point, business plans, I think, are largely entirely useless. But they do, I think, certainly give you the confidence. And they did for me. Like, I ended up I went to London Business School for a little bit. And it wasn't because I didn't think I really needed the education. It wasn't even that it was particularly practically useful in terms of building a business plan. But it was, again, just that step to sort of say, right, okay, I've kind of gone through the motions of preparing at least. I've actually taken these necessary steps. I'm just going to do it now. And then you just go and do it, basically.
Did you sort of have, I know, because, you know, a lot of the moment around angel investment or crowdfunding or anything like that, did you sort of go down that route of sort of getting someone to sort of fund you and you know, and sort of be that support there from that side?
So to start off, we fund it ourselves, but like we did it proper, like bootstrap, like really, really very, very little cash went into the business. And we sort of grew it organically for the first 6-9 months. And then we brought in some angel investors at that stage, and then have done various rounds of investment funding since then. So we've done sort of 4 or 5 rounds of funding since then.
Cool. And Hazy, I mean, did you have sort of mentors or anyone you sort of lent on to sort of help you launch it, I guess? Or
no, I suppose like Max, obviously the business plan, I didn't really write one, but I did. I basically said, right, this is what I want to do, and I wrote down the steps. So first step, register the company with HMRC. Second step, get a logo. Third, it wasn't a business plan, but in reality it was a route to market. So I just listed it back, because overall it can seem daunting, like I've got to do all these things, but I just broke it down individually. And then, you know, funding wise, I just funded it myself. So, you know, for my business model, it was okay. I thought, right, there's 5 products I'm going to sell for now. I'm only going to buy 2 of those each time. And then once we made the money for that, and that's where it's great that the boys can do that when they're playing. So I made all the money from that. Then I bought some more, earned the money from that, bought some more. So I just scaled it up. It worked for me. And, you know, now you get to a level where if I wanted to hold the same amount of stock that we all hold now, I would need investors, because it wouldn't have been physically possible, or the money would have been ridiculous. So it just takes time to build that up. I didn't know a lot about business to go and get someone's money at the time, investors, or borrow money, because I had to learn. I had to learn about the business, and, you know, I'd be more confident now, more so than, you know, than I was there. So that was my decision, to just start small, you know, and grow it, because I wasn't confident in my ability, if I'm perfectly honest, of taking someone's money and losing it for them. So I just built it slowly.
Yeah. And did you, and I suppose the question to both of you is, did you sort of go through any professional or practical sort of steps to get ready for launch? I know, Hayes, you did some stuff, and Max, similar. Did you do anything to build that knowledge around, you know, the business, the service, the product, whatever you were doing?
I suppose for me, I just spoke to, in my family, I haven't really got anyone that owns a business. So again, no one was there to even talk about things like VAT, you know, corporation, all these kind of things I had no idea about. So I was just going in and learning every day blind. But then as time progressed and people who had businesses, you know, actually, it's funny, a year before I retired, we did a corporate event, and it was a day off for the boys. It was the Cheltenham races, and I spoke to a guy there about a business. He owned a business. I spent a bit of time with him. You know, these events that the players never want to do. I never wanted to do it. Got a bad belly. Got up in that. So anyway, I went, spoke to this guy for a while, and when I retired, probably about 6 months after the club announced I retired, he sent me an email to say, "You give up your time." A few months ago, I had a great chat with you, and he said, "I'm willing to give you some of my time. I own these businesses." So then I sort of had him as a mentor for a bit. So it was really, really interesting that, and that's what I've learned quite a lot. You give up a bit of time for people without trying to get something back, and it's sort of come back karma. People who I've helped and done bits and pieces with have really, you know, benefited the business.
And Max,
Yeah,
same
for
to
sure.
you. Did you sort of
Yeah.
do anything around, you know, I know, you know, did you become a yoga teacher, for example, and just sort of understand what was needed? Did you do any qualifications or, you know, steps to
No,
get
I didn't. I mean, I did, as I said, I went to London Business School and did like it was a part of the MBA at London Business School. But I, as I said, that was more for kind of my purpose to kind of kick me up the arse to actually make the step to do it. And actually, from a learning perspective, I didn't learn a huge amount, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I think it depends somewhat on confidence. Just like depends if you've got the confidence and you've got the ability and willingness and or network to be able to learn from. As Andy says, like people, my experience is that people will have a lot of respect for entrepreneurs, and they appreciate and will give time to people who are going out on their own and giving it a go, kind of thing. And so there are so many people that I was introduced to or would just have a chat with, and they're always willing to give up, you know, an hour or so of their time just to talk through their experiences. And I continue to do that today, and always have, because it's a big source of learning for sure. And then I think the other thing is you just learn on the job. And ultimately the nice thing in a way is that generally when you start a business, it starts very small. And so the mistakes aren't that painful. And if you forget your first VAT return because you don't know when the deadline is, it's not the end of the world, because it was a VAT return of £4 or something. And whereas, you know, and then you learn and you do it again. So mostly I would say, you know, it's about learning on the job for sure. And that's what makes you a better entrepreneur over the years, basically.
So, and again, we sort of talk to the players a lot about that network and those people you can sort of reach out to and just have conversations with. And I guess you guys are just highlighting, you know, how important it is to have those people around you to, you know, to pose questions, to get some advice, you know, whether it's in business or personal, whatever it might be. So good to hear that, you know, you did lean on those guys or have those guys in your sort of network to speak to. I guess with this all, you know, and it's the luxury of the position we're in hindsight, you know, what sort of, would you have changed anything in terms of your approach to sort of starting the business, to sort of launching it? Is there anything you'd sort of look back and go, you know what, I'd sort of do something a bit different to make it a bit easier? Because you guys are passing on your knowledge to the guys that are listening. So hopefully there's you know, we can give them a bit of an insight into it. Anyone here, Andy, let's go you first, Hose.
It's a tough one, because obviously now you know all the lessons, like you learn so much, but I remember watching a documentary about people saying about how do people lose £1 million, like when they win the lottery, and you think, how these fools lost all that money? And they were saying, it's a stupid analogy, but if you're given Arnold Schwarzenegger's body, you're probably going to lose it within 6 months, because you don't know how to get there and to build it and to keep it that way. So it's a crazy analogy, but for me, like, I just say every part of it was a learning curve. And now it gives you, I'm probably saying for you, Max, it gives you a really good basis. You try and cut corners, you try and do this, or you try and get someone to do it. For me, I just rather start where it is. You can answer most questions with Google. It's like, it's phenomenal. You Google it, you go down a way, then that gives you another question, then you answer that question, you watch a video, you can learn a lot. And for me, I really wouldn't change it. Even though I made some terrible mistakes, I wouldn't really change it.
Any mistakes jump out in terms of some classics, but just some ones that really sort of stick out or still?
Yeah, I suppose from people hiring, bringing staff in for the first time, believing what people say to you, where you perceive yourself as that you're a rugby player, you haven't got much knowledge in that area, so you bring other people in who are perceived very knowledgeable and experts, and actually when you break down the layers, there's not a lot going on. Of course there is some people, but for me, my experience is that it was people really that that I had to really struggle with and try and get people that really wanted to work hard and wanted to make themselves better.
Yeah. And Max, over to you. Sort of, have you got anything that sticks out in terms of your launching it all, and any sort of things you can look back and go, I wish I'd done it slightly different or approached it differently?
Exactly the same as Andy. Like, I think, like, when you look, like, I look back now, and there's a part of me that now I know what path I took and what was sort of the right path in retrospect. There's a part of me that says, yeah, I wish I'd gone back at the beginning and raised £1 million straight away and just gone for plan A straight away. But you realize that actually you wouldn't have gone the same way, and you wouldn't have learned in the same way along the way, and you wouldn't be in the position you're in now, and you would probably be in a worse position, basically. And so I agree. I think like I don't really regret generally how we did it at all. And I think it was a really good learning experience that meant that we kind of went through a load of mistakes, and we got some things wrong and we got some things right. I think in some instances, probably I'm naturally quite a stubborn person. I think there is a real value in learning really quickly and confidently changing direction and saying, that's not working, let's go do something else if that thing's not working. And so if there was one thing, it's probably actually just being more decisive and less dogmatic about the route you wanted to go down.
Yeah. And I think a good point for that, Josh, is especially for when retiring for players, if you're learning and you're busy, that keeps your mind occupied and you're not thinking, oh, I wish I was doing this or there with the rugby, because you're like, Jesus, it's 6 o'clock. Literally, it's gone as a flash, and you're not really pondering on the past. You're looking to the future, but because you're learning and you're like. So I think that was a massive thing to for me to get over, to say, right, rugby's done.
Yeah, and I think, as you said previously, sort of drawing that line between now is Smart Home Sounds. That's me now. I'm not playing. I've left that game behind, and I've got to move on with what's going to be my future for family and for myself. And that line was drawn quite quickly with yourself. And I guess on both of those points, what have you learned more from the sort of the successes of the business, or the failures, or maybe the mistakes of the businesses? Because we talk a lot about failure and how everyone learns from failure, etc. But actually, there's a lot to be learned from things going well. What sort of have you learned through successes or failures, or Max?
It's got to be both. I mean, you've got to inevitably, I think as long as you're learning from them, that's the key thing. And you've got it, if you're pretty foolish if you're not learning from your successes, because if you have a success and you put it in a box and say, well, let's just forget about that, then you're not making much progress. And likewise, if you don't learn from mistakes, then you'll repeatedly make them over and over again. So both are obviously, for me, certainly absolutely key.
Yeah, I think I'm quite bad. I never reflect back on, I never stop and think, oh, we've done that well. We look at it and think we've had good success. Right, let's go again. But it actually is quite important to reflect and just say, right, that's a good point. And that's why now as a business, we try to have milestones, because it's easy just to forget what's going on and not actually celebrate anything and enjoy anything. You just keep going and going. So for us, it's, again, you learn a lot about yourself when you're in the business. You learn a lot. And, for me, that's a big thing that I find, is not reflecting on anything.
And I guess it's important, isn't it, doing that, learning who you are as an individual, how you work, you need to go on that, I suppose, journey a bit, and that sort of, making mistakes, tripping up every now and again, doing things well. And otherwise it's maybe a bit too easy. You hear a lot of people that have started businesses, failed them, start another one, failed that, and it just, you ever think, are you going to get a break? And ultimately, hopefully they do in the end. But there's a lot of that. Started a business, didn't work. Started again, didn't work. And then for whatever reason, they've learned a lot from them. I guess on that, question to both, was there any point where you sort of went, sod this, like, things maybe weren't going too well and you were just like ready to go, let me just go and get a job, 9 to 5, whatever it might be. I don't want this, pressure of owning the business, of growing the business. Was there any point of you saying, I just wanted to give it up?
Max?
Honestly, not. Like, there's definitely massive highs and massive lows, and that's just like it is. That's the joy of it. That's like the fabric of it. Is that it is compared to a normal job. It is very big highs and very big lows. And I think you generally, one thing I've certainly found is that you realize those highs and lows continue forever. They tend to be bigger things, but you still react in exactly the same way. So first time we ever had a sold out class, it felt like I was, I'd just listed the business, or I'd just made a first million or whatever it might have been. But actually it was, fairly insignificant. And now those successes are bigger and the downs are arguably lower. But I think that I've been really fortunate because I've genuinely always enjoyed it. I've genuinely enjoyed the mental stimulation, the almost academic rigor of it. But I've also I launched a business with my closest mate. And so I've just always smiled throughout it. Like, even last 12 months have been not a great time to be running a yoga business, in that we haven't really traded for 12 months. And to be honest, I've still really enjoyed it. Like, there's definitely not been a point where I've thought I'm going to chuck in the towel kind of thing.
I think for me, I've had some dark days. So obviously I'm running the business on my own. So it's sometimes when you haven't got that person, I probably go home and talk to my wife and she's thinking, what the hell is he on about? She just doesn't want to hear it. So I've had some dark days, but you always have that resilient, you don't want to quit, and you know that you can get through it. And I suppose that's part of the challenge of it is figuring out how you can make it better, learn from it, right, let's go again. But there's no questions, you will have some dark days where you have to ask yourself a lot of questions. But again, like I said, having a partner, sometimes you think that is, if you've got that person to bounce ideas off, you're probably the same, Max. It's like, it helps, like I have someone who's a mentor, but it's just nice to having that conversation with someone. And you feel like the pressure's not so much solely on you, it's sort of diversified a bit.
Yeah. And it also just makes it more enjoyable. And I'd extend that to just people generally around your team. Like, it's not just a founder. I've always loved having a founder. It's got pitfalls for sure. Like, some people find it a nightmare starting a business with another person. I think finding a co-founder is especially hard. We fell into it naturally and it worked for us. But if you don't have a co-founder, at least having good people around you is absolutely essential. And it's one of the luxuries of running your own business, is you choose the people around you. In most companies, teams, whatever it is, you don't choose the people around you. You just have to muddle along and try and make it work and assume they're hopefully good people. But if you're running a business, you're able to say, this is a person I want to hang out with, I want to work with, I want to spend my time with, kind of thing. And so you do well to make sure they're pretty good people.
A question just kind of sort of relevant maybe to that. Did any of you guys have a sort of deadline or a money limit at the start that meant if it didn't work, then you'd walk away? Was there sort of that, was there that thinking or that plan?
So it was quite interesting for me because obviously I stopped. So I always planned. I mean, everyone's different. My plan was, whenever I retire, I'm going to probably try and keep 3 months away. I worked out that I could live on a minimum of X amount of money, and that I'm going to have 3-4 months of money saved, because if most players are on it, they can save that money. So for 4 months, I didn't touch any money in the business. And then I thought, if I work hard, should I get enough growth that I can then take that little amount, again, the minimum I needed. So that was my strategy. I didn't take anything for 4 months. And then I took, if I could take that wages, then the small amount that I knew I could live on, the bare minimum. And I did that for probably, a year. So I paid myself a really low wage for that first year. And then as the business grows, and hopefully there's more money in it, but you can start taking a bit more money. But what you do find is you normally leave the money in the business, and you think, I just want to use that money to grow and grow and grow. Next year I'll be able to do that. But yeah, I give myself those 4 months. If it didn't work from there, I didn't even stupidly admit I didn't have a plan B. There was no plan B for me. It was either, this is it, my back's against the wall, I've got to make it work no matter what. And that worked for me. And I believe probably because I didn't have a plan B, that's probably why, you know, I didn't so much need to use it.
Yeah, I'm similar in that, like, I think that the minute you've got a plan B, you almost definitively don't have the faith in plan A. And so I think it's difficult to set yourself milestones that you say, look, if I haven't achieved X by, you know, this time, then I'm packing it in, or I'm going to, you know, because it's all about feeling. It's about whether you still believe. And if you still believe in it and you've still got absolute conviction and absolute determination and resilience, then push on. Like, and that will remain the case forever. And I think, like, ours from our perspective was different because it was you know, we ended up bringing on investors at a relatively early stage, but so it's less about taking money out of the business to pay yourself, but you still have, you know, you still constantly have cash cycles where you facing possibility of running out of cash, but you need to either perform out of it or raise more money, kind of thing. And that's just, you know, you'll always have those strains, but I definitely feel as an entrepreneur, it's so much about feeling rather than finances. Basically, you've got to feel like it's worthwhile you doing this, and you've still got absolute self-belief and belief in the concept or belief in what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when we did it, when I retired, we were probably getting 1 to 2 orders a day, which wasn't a lot of orders at the time. And I remember when I retired, I was watching the orders, and then we had no orders for a week. I was like, is the website working? Is it broke? Something must be. And literally, so everything just started imploding in on me. And I was thinking, oh my God, here we go. But then luckily I just kept on what I was doing, and then they started to pick up again and started to grow. Then I think as soon as you get a little bit of reward for a bit of work you've done, it really incentivizes you just to keep going. So it's similar to, you know, when you train hard, you do this or you do that, you get a little bit of, you can see what you've done, and it just spurs you on to do more.
Yeah. And sort of, you know, I know, Hayes, yourself, in terms of we talk about transferable skills with players and what they potentially bring into their second career, and sort of the mindset and maybe the traits that you guys have. I mean, what do you feel that something you had in mindset or skill set you had from maybe previous career, or just, you know, you yourself in terms of a character, has helped you sort of be a entrepreneur, you know, own your own business? Do you think there's something that sort of, you know, the way you approach things, traits or skill?
Yeah, I think you've definitely got something in. It's a balancing act, because I think you've got to realise as a rugby player, when you retire, unless you've got any skills in that area, you're basically bottom of the run. You're basically starting in the academy again. So I think you've got to be humble enough to understand that you've got nothing. You know, you're going to have to work your nuts off to basically get that level up. But then at the same time, you've also got something, normally if you're a professional rugby player, that you've got that determination, you've got that inbuilt mindset that you just keep going, you just keep working, you keep working. And the rugby, like looking back, the rugby was quite easy because a lot of it's yourself. You've got to make sure you eat right, you're chewing right. I could do that all day, that was easy. But then when you start bringing other people, you want them to the same level, and it doesn't work. So I think it's a double-edged sword. One, you wouldn't be a professional rugby player unless you've got a pretty strong mindset. So use that, but also reflect back in that you probably haven't got no skills, but you might have. But I had no skills in what I had. I was basically in the academy again. I was back getting abused, getting boys cups of teas, cleaning the pitch up. I was doing all that again, which was fine. I was ready to do that. I loved it. So just started from the bottom.
Max, anything you've sort of learned along, earlier life that has enabled you, or you feel has helped you be an entrepreneur and have a business?
I think it's less for me. Like, it's about characteristics rather than necessarily what you've learned prior to it. And I think you have to be pretty absurdly determined. And I think optimism certainly helps. I think it's pretty rare you find pessimistic entrepreneurs, because you kind of just always got to have that belief, as I said before. And unless you've got a completely universally perfect product or proposition, then there are probably times where actually it's your self-belief alone that's getting you through, because actually the concept isn't necessarily that good, or isn't, there'll be times where you need to drag the business through, basically. And that's why optimism is always really helpful, because you still have this belief that it is, you know, that everything will be good and you'll find a solution, you'll get through it, basically. And so I think it's those two of sort of optimism and resilience, kind of, you know, doggedness, I think is other like pretty critical qualities, I think.
And how do you guys sort of, you know, they talk especially about sort of working sort of in the business, maybe more than on the business, especially in the initial stage of setting up, you know, you're one doing it on your own or just you and someone else, but you're trying to grow a business, you know, whilst doing all the things you do, but grow it as well, you know, day-to-day running, etc. How did you approach that in terms of, you know, growing whilst doing the day-to-day selling or sort of franchising or, you know, doing your stuff? How did you sort of manage that approach?
I don't know. I think like it's in reality, like when you're starting a business, it's so scrappy and you're so like, you just do everything and you just run at everything. There's you don't have time for beautiful structure and appraisal and kind of stepping back and taking moments to work on and moments to work in. You just fucking get on with it, basically. And it happened to be, again, I was fortunate that to start off with, we were running loads of yoga classes, and Nick, my co-founder, was a yoga instructor and I was a commercial person. And so I was generally working on the commercial side of the business and the growth of the business. But ultimately, I was also there at the beginning, ticking people's name off when they came to classes, because you just do it. You just get on with it, basically. And you basically have to just work out, you know, you have a very long to-do list and you just run at everything with urgency and make sure you tick off as many things as you can, basically.
Yeah, I think it's all that grows organically. Again, like if I would have, like, to begin with, if I'd have been working on the business, I wouldn't have known what the hell to work on. So again, it was organically growing and understanding, you know, the business. And, you know, then as we started to grow, you know, sometimes you take yourself out, but actually you're probably the best employee in your business. So by whipping you out of that, obviously that's the long-term plan, but it just needs to be phased. And again, it's just learning bits and pieces. For me, it was about the business. And, you know, now, you know, I can try and work on it a bit more and bring people in. But that's took 4 or 5 years to get to that level. It's not something that we had the luxury of doing straight away.
And I guess on that, you know, for both of you, I guess focus is, you know, you alluded to it earlier, Max. Focus is probably one of the things to really concentrate on. You know, they sort of talk about the gap between the life you live now and the one you want to live is focus. And I guess that's with all you guys that you do, is you know where you want to get to and you're getting there. Would that be right? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, it's you know, it's a relentless, like, yeah, it's a relentless drive, basically. You have to have an extraordinary degree of determination, I think, for sure. But I think the thing with that is that I think if you become too goals orientated, obsessed with direction and where you're going, like it's rarely a joy. And I think that's why I said, you know, goes back to what I said about having good people around you. It's like, it's, you know, sounds like a corny old like Instagram quote, but like you kind of got to enjoy the journey. Otherwise it's going to be a pretty shitty one. And you probably won't end up achieving what you want to. The nice thing is you enjoy it along the way, is that even if you slightly miss where you're going to, like, you know, our first business plan said we were selling the business after 3 years, and I'm 9 years in and there's no sign of us selling it. But I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad I didn't sell it 5 years ago, because, you know, I'm loving doing what I'm doing, kind of thing. So it's a combination of both, I think.
Cool. And I'll jump into some questions that have come through. But before I do that, I guess the last one from me, because we're sort of in on that sort of 45-minute mark. What sort of 3 bits of advice, I'll leave it to 3, would you give to someone that is thinking about starting their own business? Hazy, I'll go to you first. Max is still thinking.
I think the first thing is you have to be, like I said, massive resilient. You have to be resilient, because stuff's going to go wrong and you just got to keep on going with it. I'd say resilience, and I suppose I wouldn't really say anything else, but I just wouldn't let anything deter you. You know, on hindsight, I remember sitting down and thinking, well, you know, Gloucester, everyone, you know, Gloucester, any other club, Gloucester mutes, Gloucester, you know, and here's me trying to start an e-commerce company to compete with John Lewis Amazon based in Gloucester, that is based like a farming town that people think. So that was what was trying to define me, and I didn't let it define me. And, you know, I've researched Google, just really, really looked at what was out there and how you can break it down granularly, and then try and just step by step. So for me, it's not like 3 bits. I would just say resilience is hell, but don't let anything define you. If you want to do something in a certain area, I'd say it's 100% possible if you're willing to, work really, really hard and be humble and understand that, nothing probably.
Nice. Max?
I think one thing you said earlier is key. I think learning from people, talking to people is absolutely key. Like genuinely going into things with an open mind, understanding you don't know shit. You're going to learn a lot along the way, and there are a lot of other people out there who are willing to help. I think is definitely a really helpful kind of pointer for sure. I think then just doing it. Like I think so many people just piss around for a long time and don't, they think about it, they dream of it, they talk to people about it, and that's it. You need to just get on and do it, because you learn everything by doing it rather than by reading or thinking kind of thing. And then I think the final thing is that like I'm naturally an extraordinarily optimistic person, and that's great, and I think it's a really important thing, but I think it's also really important to understand your own optimism and to be aware of it, and either find a pessimist to tell you that you're being ludicrously optimistic, or just be aware of the fact that you are a ludicrous optimist, because most entrepreneurs are, I think, and most people will build a business plan that says, we're going to be making millions in 5 days time, but it just never works out. Like it is, I remember someone saying to me, like when I was having a conversation with someone, saying, just an absolute truism of starting a business is your revenues will not grow as fast as you plan them to, and your costs will grow faster. And I was like, sure, but everyone knows that, but it's not actually going to happen. It's obviously not going to happen with us, obviously, but there's just no business that doesn't happen with. And I think that being aware of that and recognizing that with a bit of pessimism is definitely pretty key, I think.
I think what's quite interesting as well, I don't know if you're the same, Max, that even starting the business, if it got whipped away from me today or a year after I started it, I'd be more employable from the skills I learned way vastly anyway. So even if it failed, I probably could have got way more salary by working for someone. I don't know if you feel the same way as well.
I feel the same way. I don't want to test it, and I've no idea. I sometimes think that and think like, if I did lose my job, I've been doing this for 8 years. I don't know whether anyone would want to employ me whatsoever. But yeah, I certainly feel more capable, and you definitely do learn a hell of a lot along the way, and you become a lot more commercial, a lot more kind of streetwise in terms of how to run a business. But as I said, I have no idea how that fares in the job market.
Good point. Good points. Right, we just sort of wrap things up, but a few questions that have come in, and just to sort of direct them towards you. Max, you sort of, I know we spoke before about franchising, and you guys have obviously a franchising model. What are the pros and cons of taking on a franchise, do you feel, rather than sort of setting up on your own?
So it's really interesting, because it's one of those things that franchising wasn't on my radar whatsoever. It always felt like a bit of a dirty word. It felt like basically it was fast food and stationery. And like, if you're not interested in fast food and stationery, that's kind of it. And that's true to a degree. I think historically has been quite a lot of ropey brands who do franchising. But as a model, it's a really powerful thing, which is you've got someone who's built a concept and a brand that's kind of proven, and you're able to basically take that blueprint, learn from their lessons basically, but still have the independence to kind of do it yourself. And I would say that kind of mirrors the types of people. I think if you are a very, very sort of strong-minded, completely independent person who completely wants free reign and creativity, franchising doesn't work that well for you, because you ultimately have to fit to a degree within someone else's parameters. But if you're someone who's pretty entrepreneurial and wants to do something themselves, but actually quite relishes the idea of being guided a bit and having a bit of structure and de-risking sort of the entrepreneurship journey a little bit, then it does work really, really well. And like, we see a lot of our franchisees are people who are entrepreneurial by nature. They might love yoga or want to run a sort of fitness business of some sort, but they don't have a concept themselves and don't necessarily want to just dive into the deep end. And so instead, they're able to stick a bit of money that's not an enormous amount into starting their own business, and know that you've kind of got a 95+% chance of success. So it is different though. It's definitely different, but it obviously has some of the same characteristics.
Good to know, and I think good for players to sort of understand as well, in terms of, as you said, they might not want to feel sort of jumping in feet first on their own because they might just not have that you know, mentality, but want to do something, and having that support. I guess again it goes back to that people around you that can help you grow a business, whether, you know, like that. Questions both of you. Day to day, what does it look like, and as the businesses have grown, has that sort of day to day change? I know we've sort of alluded to when you first started, probably very much on your own, getting things done, ticking people into classes. What does day to day look like for you guys now? Probably different than it probably did a year ago, but yeah, what does it look like?
I mean, for me, I seem to be getting busier and busier every day. You know, I used to like to lie in. Now I'm up most mornings at 5 a.m., which is no joke. But so I try and get up in the morning, try and train most days. I think that really helps for my mindset. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, we just, you know, as the business grows, I thought I'd be doing less, but it's actually, as the business grows, I seem to be getting involved more and more, and there's more things to do, which again is an issue I need to look at. And, you know, why is that? Is that something I'm doing wrong? Am I not, you know, am I growing without the right structure in place? It's all things you ask yourself. But yes, the days are busy. I don't get a lot of time to myself, really.
Yeah, mine's definitely evolved for sure. Like, so you start off and you are doing everything, and it's generally pretty unstructured, and it's very much like hands-on. I think like we grew a lot, and like pre-COVID we had 25 employees in our office, and so but you've got like in the end I ended up predominantly managing people and managing shareholders, which is not what you expect to do if you're running a yoga business necessarily. But that, you know, is a gradual transition to getting there basically. But I think it's interesting because I think that it's hard to force that. I think generally that happens again, you know, relatively organically. Like as the business evolves, you naturally evolve with it, and there might be some step changes along the way, but they generally tend to be incremental and relatively small. And so, you know, you evolve as a person, and the business evolves with you, kind of thing. But yeah, it's definitely, you know, 8 years in it's always as busy. You know, it's always been as busy, and that never changes. And I think it probably could do if you wanted to, but again, some of that's just down to the mentality of an entrepreneur. Is you want to do it yourself, and you want to push on, and you want to, you know, you've got that determination to keep pushing, kind of thing. And so you kind of, you know, you're sort of forcing that yourself in a way.
I guess this might answer the question that sort of came: do they get time off? You know, what's your time off look like, chaps? And I guess on that, I know probably the answer to it, but please do. How important is that balance between you're not always in business? Actually, you've got families, you've got social, you've got other things to think about rather than just that, you know, because otherwise you could be burning out. So
I'm terrible at it. My balance is bad, which I'm trying to fix all the time. Again, like I said, you learn a lot about yourself. I think it's massively important to get away as well. You're probably saying, Max, you go away for a week, whatever, you come back and actually, even though you think you're not doing a business, you actually come up with better ideas when you're not in the business. So you do that, but it is hard because there's always something to do, and there's always, like, you've always got a to-do list that's massive, and you just got to say no and close the laptop, which is hard. But yeah, I mean, that's something I've got to work on. And like I said, you find a lot about yourself, your weaknesses and stuff, and that mine is having that balance, you know.
Mine's definitely got better. I think some of it, again, you know, you kind of evolve, and like, but to start off with, I didn't have kids and I wasn't married, and you're kind of like, and so you had no other responsibilities, and so I just kind of threw everything at it and thought that was the way to do it. And in a way, when you start a business in the first place, you kind of do have to do that to a degree. Like you don't have other people you can lean on necessarily. You don't have space, so you just have to just you know, you should be working your first year, you should be working absurd hours, and you should be absolutely kind of breaking yourself to a degree. And it's kind of cliche, but it's kind of true, I think, in a way. And then you evolve and you recognize that you can, you know, hand that off to other people. And it's, again, it feels like a kind of gradual evolution. I've definitely learned for sure is that like balance is key. And I think I've actually got a lot better of it. Some of it just came naturally from things like having kids, but you realize that actually you like, that's got to distract you, and you have kind of no choice in that. And that actually that's a pretty healthy, helpful balance. That and COVID, because running a yoga business during COVID is a little different.
I bet. So the last one, just before we wrap it up, what was the most effective way of marketing your business? Obviously, there's a lot of channels now that can, make people aware of what you do. What have you found has been the most effective way of getting your business out there and people knowing about it and understanding about it?
For us, it's definitely evolved, which is really interesting. So like at an early stage, and it very much depends on sector to sector. Like the very early stage, our business owes a lot of its growth to press. So we had a lot of press at a very early stage, and that really kind of catapulted it forwards. The world of press has evolved massively. In the same way, there was a stage where social media was extremely powerful in terms of marketing a business very effectively. I think that's waned to a degree. I think the interesting thing is that throughout that, as an experience-led business, but I think most businesses are experience-led to a degree, regardless of any changes or cycles in marketing trends. The thing that will always remain true is if you give people a good customer experience, that is going to carry you a hell of a long way. And for us, if that's word of mouth that comes from really quality experiences is definitely the thing that is the most effective and is the most timeless and is just never going to go away.
Yeah, I think that is in the same for us. We obviously, there's always just get on social media, you're going to make a fortune. So for us, it's not the product. Maybe if you're selling some products are amazing to sell socially. So I think it depends what product you have. For us, we used a lot of organic Google. So for us, I was like, if you search this, how do I get to the top of Google? And that's where I focused all my energy on search engine optimization. Recently, YouTube. We've been on YouTube for the last 2 to 3 years. And I'd say the last 12 months has changed our business forever, really, because of YouTube. I think it's the world's second biggest search engine. For us, it's an absolute game changer. Massive.
Great. Well, those are questions answered, and I think we'll leave it there. We've been going a good hour. We could probably chat for far longer about business and you guys successfully doing it for a number of years, but appreciate your time this evening. I suppose, get you away from the kids and having to do all that sort of stuff, but really insightful and interesting conversations, guys. Appreciate you jumping on. If guys have got any questions that didn't get answered, then please let your development manager know, and we can get them answered by Andy or Max at a later date. Yeah. But
obviously, it probably goes without saying, as I said earlier, that it's useful to chat with people. If anyone does want to chat or have got any questions, then we're obviously happy to chat with people for sure.
Lovely, thanks, mate. Appreciate it. I know Hazell will extend that as well. So, guys, thank you ever so much. Have a good evening, and may it continue in terms of the success in the business.
Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
Cheers, guys.